Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker, and today we're going to go over some of the new keywords and the new enchantment type in the upcoming set, Murder at Karlov Manor. And I want to talk to you about how you can take advantage of these cards, what are some other good, options to look into when you're building around these keywords, and kind of just how they work, and maybe this will help you understand that better. But this set has 4 new keywords that are very, very fun. We have Disguise, Cloak, Suspect, and Collect Evidence. And the new enchantment type is called Cases. Because we're all detectives in this set, of course we have to have some cases. So let's start out by talking about Disguise and Cloak because they are very similar, and I think they're going to end up confusing people. I need to mention that these 2 new keywords are basically updated versions of Morph and Manifest, which I believe came out in the cons block or around there. So to keep these existing keywords in mind when you're building around the new mechanics is important because you will find a lot of cards that maybe were printed with something else in mind, but because we are flipping cards over, you might have crossover that would be really, really good to add to your deck if you are trying to build around this new mechanic. Or if you have decks revolving around this old mechanic, this is a great time to look at what's out there and see if maybe we get some new stuff to help upgrade those decks. But the one major difference I want to say between the Morph and Manifest and Disguise and Cloak are that Morph and Manifest makes a 2/2 colorless creature, while Disguise and Cloak makes a 2/2 with Ward 2. And this is a small change, but Ward 2 is actually pretty nice. It's going to help protect your stuff from just getting destroyed, especially if it's, choose a bunch of targets. Well, your opponent's not going to want to choose your creatures because they got to pay extra to target them. So this is a very, very cool effect, and just something else to keep in mind that if you do cross these cards, make sure you have separate tokens because, Morph, Manifest, Disguise, and Cloak are different. So starting off with Disguise, or updated Morph, this works by paying 3 generic mana and playing this card face down as a 2/2. Now you can do this on cards that say so, and that's also another difference between Cloak, because we'll get into that. But Disguise only lets you do it to cards that say you can do it to them. Disguise cards also have the ability to turn face up for a certain cost. This effect might reduce the amount of mana you have to cast if you're casting it for its Disguise cost, or it actually might be different mana, whereas, you might have white, white, red, for example, and it might just be a white and a red, or just a red, or something to cast this for its Disguise cost. In addition, the flipping from Disguise might also trigger an ability on the card. These can really be a surprise, and nobody at the table is going to know what it is but you, because it's upside down, that you can kind of pop it whenever you want, and really, maybe it's a counter, maybe it deals damage, maybe it does whatever. This can really change up the game and kind of keeps you at a position where your opponents don't know what to do, so maybe they're not going to attack you. Another note is while this card is face down and it is disguised or cloaked, it is technically a colorless creature, which is important because some effects care about colorless creatures. For example, the new Vannifar, Evolved Enigma, cares about placing counters on colorless creatures. So while this is flipped over, whether it's cloaked or disguised, because they're both colorless, you can place counters on it, on abilities that say, or things that just care about colorless creatures. Something else to keep in mind is that when these cards flip, they keep all of the counters that are placed on them, which is very cool. Because technically they don't change zones, they stay on the battlefield, they don't get exiled and then come back. They keep everything that was on them previously, which means if you buff them up or if you put, who knows what on them, they'll keep all of those, which is a cool effect as well. Now talking about Vannifar, Evolved Enigma, she has another triggered ability that cares about cloaking cards. So let's talk about cloaking now. To cloak a card, or manifest, you place it from your hand onto the battlefield, and then can turn it face up if it's a creature for its casting cost or mana cost. Now this is important because you can only flip creatures. If you decide to cloak a card and it's an enchantment, a land, whatever, you cannot flip it unless you have something that says flip it. You can only flip creature cards. So that is something else very important to keep in mind. But everything else about this ability is identical to Disguise. It's still a 2/2 with Ward 2 and still a colorless creature. And Cloak only lets you flip creatures, and most of the time doesn't have any additional effects like Disguise does, because Disguise, you're paying a little bit extra, so when you flip it, you get something out of it. But you do have some advantages. One, by cloaking a card, you can basically put it onto the battlefield as a 2/2 by getting around that 3 mana. mana, which if you have a disguise card and you cloak it by some card effect or activated ability, then you can still flip it for either its disguise or casting cost, because that's an activated ability on the card. So this might be a cool effect to kind of build around, is putting a little bit of both in your deck to make it so that you can take advantage of the cloaking, cheating it into play, and then disguise, getting the benefit out of it. So my last note about these cards is just be patient. These effects are very similar, and I know during pre-release or when these cards first come out, people are gonna, mess this up. It is a bit confusing, so just be patient with those people. Next up is a mechanic that is going to turn us all into detectives with Suspect. Suspect is a cool mechanic that lets you place a Suspect counter on whatever creature you suspect, and it stays that way until it changes zones or dies or would drop off by, like exiling it. So a suspected creature gains menace and loses the ability to block. Whether you are using this offensively to make it harder for your opponents to block you, or defensively to cause an opponent not to be able to block your incoming creature, this effect can be used in different ways and can keep your opponents guessing if you use it, both offensive and defensively. Another note is there are spells or abilities that may be able to do this at instant speed, basically giving something menace or making it so it can't block at instant speed, helping you deal more damage or even win the game. So before we get into the final keyword, let me just say, if you're interested in this set, commander decks, or Magic the Gathering content in general, you should subscribe to my channel to see the latest news and some really cool commander decks that I build every week. It would really mean a lot, and you would really help support me, so thank you. So the last keyword in this set is a kind of an ability more than a keyword, even though they're all kind of abilities. It's called Collect Evidence. So this new mechanic is going to be useful to all those graveyard is a resource players. When a card you have tells you you can collect evidence to get some additional effect, or maybe you have to pay it in order to cast the card, you exile cards from your graveyard whose mana cost equals or exceeds the collect evidence cost. In some cases that cost might be X, so you can continue to exile cards with a cost to, make that X get bigger and bigger. This effect works similar to Delve, which has you exile cards from your graveyard, but this cares about the mana cost on the card rather than the amount of cards. For example, lands in 0 mana cost cards will have no effect when you are playing Collect Evidence, and that's something to keep in mind. But I can't wait to see how decks built around this mechanic end up, because it seems like it could be a lot of fun, and there's a lot of really good ways to build this. If you're playing a Golgari deck where you're just pouring stuff into the graveyard, you have lots of stuff you can just get rid of that you're never going to bring back. If you're playing a mill deck, there's a bunch of collect evidence stuff that you can just get rid of to gain a bunch of additional effects. In addition to that, another use for collect evidence is in exiling that stuff, because whatever you collect gets exiled, which means any deck that cares about you exiling or putting cards into exile is really going to like this, especially because if it matters about the amount of cards going into exile, exiling lands is great because it doesn't pay anything. You can just put a bunch of stuff in, but also know that when you're collecting evidence, there isn't like a limit. It's not like, okay, well, you hit 5, that's the most you can put in. You can put in as much as you want as long as it hits that collect evidence amount. And the last item to discuss today is the new enchantment type that is coming in Murder at Karlov Manor, which is cases. Think of these like a detective case that you're trying to solve. The cards are set up very similar to sagas and the D&D classes, but there's a couple items that are different about these. So starting out, whenever you cast the enchantment case, you get an effect right away for casting it. Maybe it's look at the top 2 cards of your library, maybe it's deal damage, whatever it is, you get that effect as soon as you cast it. Then you are immediately at the second part, the to solve section. In the to solve section, it is all about trying to hit or reach a goal. Some cases rely on you hitting a certain amount of lands. Some cases rely on you casting a certain amount of spells per turn. They all vary based on the type of case that you get. Once you've met the goal for the to solve section of the case, you get the reward section, which is the solved section. You've cracked the case, you solved it, whatever. Now this may be a static ability that you just get. It may be whenever you cast a spell, you draw a card. It may be every turn, discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. There's a whole bunch of different effects, so keep those in mind. But additionally, they may have you sacrifice the case in order to get an effect, or it's just a enchantment that stays on the battlefield at that point. Either way, this is a really cool way to, include enchantments and this detective theme into this set, and giving a whole new kind of idea for players to build around. Maybe you want to build a case deck where, you're just trying to solve as many cases as you can a game for fun. Who knows? And hopefully this won't be a single set, enchantment type, but only time will tell. And that's it. So I hope this helped you understand some of the new mechanics and cards coming up in Murders at Karlov Manor. And very much I hope you enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to my channel to see more videos. I would also love it if you would leave a comment down below on what cards you're most excited for in this set. I know there's a bunch. Ravnica's my favorite set, so I'm very much looking forward to this coming out and just playing so much of it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Amiria Angel. When the earth shudders, the sky overflows. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.